A cold wind pushed dust across the empty yard while men loaded the last cattle into trucks. Boots scraped, chains clinked, and the sound felt like nails on a chalkboard. Tom Callahan kept his hands in his pockets and tried not to shake. The bank sign stood on the gate like a final stamp. He had lost the ranch, the house, the herd, the future. He told himself not to blink, not to cry, not to look weak in front of strangers. Then a small bellow came from the dark side of the barn, thin, rough, almost a cough. It cut through the noise like a voice calling his name. Tom followed the sound and found a calf lying on dirty straw. The little bull calf looked like a heap of bones under a dull coat. One ear drooped. One eye was crusted. His breath rasped as if it hurt. A hauler leaned in the doorway and said, "That one? Sick. Maybe $50 at the sale if he even stands." Tom crouched. The calf did not flinch, only dragged in another hard breath. "He's no good," the man added. "Not worth feed." Tom felt the words land inside his chest. No good. Not worth. He had heard the same whispers about himself all week. He ran a thumb along the calf's warm nose. "What's his number?" he asked. "Lot tag fell off," the man said. "Doesn't matter." His phone buzzed. A message from Laura. "Please come to Billings. We'll figure it out." Another from his daughter. "Dad, are you okay?" He stared at the screen then slid the phone away. "Load him," the hauler said. "Or leave him. Bank problem now." Tom looked back at the trucks where his last 43 head were already rolling away. The yard felt huge and empty as if the buildings had pulled back from him. "He won't make the ride," Tom said. "Not like this." The man shrugged. "Your call." Tom pulled off his work glove and pressed his bare hand to the calf's cheek. The skin felt hot. The breath rattled. "You hear me, little fella?" he said softly. "If you want to quit, I'll walk away." The calf's good eye blinked once and tried to find him. It was weak, but it was there. Tom stood, turned to the hauler and said, "I'll keep him." The man frowned. "With what money?" Tom did not answer. He only lifted the calf's head, and for the first time that day something lifted him back. Tom carried the calf into the barn, its head lolling against his arm like a rag doll. The air was cold and the smell of hay mixed with rust and dust. He placed the small body on a pile of old straw and pulled a blanket over it. "You're safe now," he whispered, though he didn't know what safety meant anymore. The trucks had gone. Silence filled the empty ranch like a wound. For years this place had been alive with the sound of cattle, boots, laughter. Now it was only him and this fragile creature, breathing shallow and uneven. He searched his old toolbox until he found a lantern, set it beside the calf and sat cross-legged nearby. The animal's sides rose and fell weakly. "You just need a bit of fight," Tom murmured. His phone buzzed again, Laura's name flashing, but he didn't answer. He couldn't bear another talk about failure. When the ringing stopped, he leaned back against the post and stared at the roof beams, counting the cracks in the wood to keep from crying. He thought of his grandfather, the man who taught him that you never turn your back on a life depending on you. Every creature has a reason even if the world can't see it yet. Hours passed before headlights cut through the night. Sarah Chin stepped out of her truck, her coat buttoned to her chin. "You called about a calf?" she said, carrying her vet kit. Tom nodded. "She's bad off." "I know it." Sarah knelt beside the animal, checking temperature, breathing, and eyes. "Pneumonia," she said. "An infection. She'll need antibiotics and fluids." Tom asked, "Can she live?" Sarah looked at him. "Maybe. But it's going to take care and money. Do you have either?" Tom's throat tightened. "I've got a little money and time's all I've got left." Sarah sighed and started working. "I'll do what I can. But Tom, even if she makes it, she won't be worth much. Not a beef breed, not healthy." Tom stared at the calf's trembling chest. "Worth isn't the same as value," he said quietly. Sarah glanced up at him and gave a small nod. "Then I guess she's yours." She packed her bag and stood. "Keep her warm, keep her fed. I'll come back tomorrow." When she left, Tom stayed by the lantern's soft glow. He brushed the calf's neck, whispering, "You don't quit and neither will I." The wind howled through the cracks, but the small sound of breathing told him he wasn't alone anymore. Tom didn't sleep that night. He sat in the barn with the lantern glowing weakly, the flame trembling every time the wind pushed through the cracks. The calf's breathing rasped like a saw against metal, sometimes pausing long enough to make Tom sit upright in fear. He poured a little warm milk into a bottle, tried to feed it, but the calf wouldn't take more than a sip. "Come on, boy," he whispered. "You have to want this." The animal's eye flickered, half aware, and Tom felt a strange pull in his chest, a mixture of pity, guilt, and something close to purpose. When dawn broke, the light crept across the barn floor, revealing dust in the air. Tom stood, stiff and cold, and stepped outside. The fields were covered in frost, stretching empty in every direction. The sound of the trucks was gone, so was everything else he had built. He rubbed his face, then went back inside. "All right," he said softly to the calf. "If you're still breathing, we're still trying." He found an old kettle, warmed water on a rusted stove, and mixed in the formula Sarah had left. This time the calf drank a little more. It was nothing, a few ounces, but it was life, and that was enough to keep Tom going. At noon Sarah returned. "You didn't sleep," she said. "Neither did he," Tom replied. She smiled faintly. "Then you two make a good pair." She checked the calf's temperature. "Still risky," she warned. "He needs a name." Tom looked up, surprised. "A name?" "Everything worth saving needs a name," she said. Tom looked at the weak animal, its ribs showing under a thin coat of brown and white. "Bull," he said finally. "Simple. Strong. Something I hope he'll be." Sarah nodded. "Then Bull it is. Keep doing what you're doing, Tom." By evening the temperature dropped fast. Tom wrapped himself in an old blanket beside the calf. His phone buzzed again, his daughter Emma. He opened the message this time. "Mom says you're taking care of some sick animal." "What?" Tom stared at the screen for a long time before typing back, because sometimes the weakest one reminds you what strength means. He hit send, set the phone down, and listened to Bull breathing, still rough but steady. It was the first sound of hope in weeks. By the third day Bull was standing. Shaky on his legs, thin as wire, but alive. Tom felt something inside him loosen, a knot that had been there for months. He watched the calf wobble toward the feed bucket and press its nose against the grain. "That's it, boy," Tom said softly. "One mouthful at a time." He poured more water into the pan and laughed quietly when Bull tried to nudge him with his head. For the first time since the foreclosure, the barn didn't feel like a tomb. It felt like a promise. But the world outside didn't share his hope. At the feed store that afternoon, whispers followed him down every aisle. "Callahan lost his mind," someone muttered. "Feeding a dairy calf when he can't feed himself." Tom pretended not to hear, but his face burned. He paid for the formula and walked out fast. When he reached the truck, Sarah was waiting, leaning on her car door. "You knew they'd talk," she said. "They always talk," Tom replied. "Doesn't change what I'm doing." She smiled. "No, it doesn't. You just keep proving them wrong." That evening, clouds rolled in thick and heavy. Tom patched leaks in the barn roof, one hand holding a flashlight, the other a hammer. Rain started before he finished, slapping against the tin roof. Bull grew restless, shifting on the straw, coughing again. Tom sat with him all night, rubbing his neck, whispering, "Stay with me." When morning came, the rain stopped and Bull was still breathing. Tom poured more milk into the bottle. This time Bull drank greedily, tail flicking weakly. "Good boy," Tom said, voice shaking. "You're not done yet." Days turned into weeks. Tom spent his last dollars on feed, skipping meals, living on coffee and determination. His daughters called again, pleading for him to come stay with them. "Dad, you can't live in that cabin," Emma said. "You're freezing out there." Tom looked through the cracked window at the calf sleeping peacefully. "I'm fine, sweetheart," he said. "This little guy needs me." "It's just an animal," she snapped. "No," he said quietly. "He's a reason." When the call ended, Tom sat back, realizing how true that was. Bull wasn't just surviving, he was giving Tom something to live for too. Winter deepened across the plains and the cold settled into everything, the wood, the air, even Tom's bones. He woke before dawn each day, breath showing in clouds, to check on Bull. The small barn groaned in the wind, but it held. The calf's coat had started to shine, his eyes clearer, the sickness slowly fading. Tom cut firewood, patched holes in the cabin, and did odd jobs in town for cash. He ate little, slept less, but never missed a feeding. The rhythm of care gave his life a shape again. One morning Sarah stopped by unannounced. "I had to see him," she said, brushing frost from her sleeves. Tom opened the barn door. Bull lifted his head, chewing lazily, and let out a soft grunt. "Well," Sarah smiled, "look at you, tough little thing." Tom grinned. "Told you he wasn't done." She checked the calf's lungs, nodding. "He's strong, Tom. Real strong. You saved him." Tom looked down at his cracked hands. "Feels like he saved me." Sarah hesitated before leaving. "You know," she said, "my brother's got a few acres outside town. The place needs work, but you could move there. Better roof, a real barn. I'll call him." Tom wanted to refuse, pride still held tight, but the thought of a warmer place for Bull softened him. All right, he said finally. Tell him I'll fix whatever's broken. By the next week, Tom and Bull had moved into the small cabin on the property. It was quiet, half frozen, but it was theirs. Every night Tom sat by the stove, Bull snoring softly nearby, and wrote small notes in an old ledger. Feed twice daily. Add grain next week. Don't give up. The words weren't for the calf, they were for himself. One evening, as snow drifted outside, Tom's phone buzzed. It was Laura again. He hesitated, then answered. Her voice was softer than he remembered. I heard you moved, she said. The girls worry. I'm okay, Tom said. Got company now. The calf? She asked, half smiling through the line. Yeah, he said quietly. Name's Bull. Laura was silent for a moment. You always did find something to save, Tom? Maybe, he said. But this time it's saving me right back. The line went quiet. Then Laura said, Don't freeze out there. He smiled. Not with him around. He's got more fight than most folks I know. And for the first time in months, Tom felt something close to peace. The first thaw came early that year, turning the snow around the cabin into a sea of mud. Tom slogged through it each morning with a pail of feed in one hand and a bucket of water in the other. Bull had grown stronger. His coat glossy now, his legs firm, his breath no longer rattling. The animal met him at the gate each day, snorting softly as if greeting an old friend. You're getting proud of yourself, Tom said, scratching between his ears. The bull pushed his head against Tom's shoulder, nearly knocking him over. Easy there, partner, Tom laughed for the first time in months. But as the ice melted, so did the little money Tom had left. His odd jobs dried up and the town people still whispered. He'd walk into the diner and the talk would hush. Some pitied him, others mocked. One afternoon, Dale Morrison, an old rancher with silver hair and a reputation that carried weight, stopped Tom in front of the post office. Heard you're still keeping that calf alive, he said. That true? Tom hesitated. Yeah. He's doing fine. Dale studied him for a long moment. Your grandfather would have done the same. Tom blinked. You knew him? Knew him well, Dale said. He believed every creature deserved a chance. Looks like you remember that. A week later, Dale came by the cabin. He brought a quiet boy of about 12. This is my grandson Jacob, he said. He needs something to care for. Figured you might show him what you know. Tom wasn't sure at first, but Jacob's shy eyes reminded him of Bull when he'd first found him. Uncertain, half-broken, still willing to trust. All right, Tom said. You can start by filling the water trough. Gently now, don't spook him. Jacob came back every afternoon after school. He'd listen carefully while Tom explained how to check for signs of sickness or how to brush the bull's coat to keep the hide clean. The boy began to open up, laughing when Bull nudged him, talking about school, asking questions. He likes me, Jacob said one day. He knows your heart's kind, Tom answered. For the first time, the barn sounded alive again. Two voices, one man, one boy, and the steady rhythm of life finding its way back. As spring gave way to summer, the cabin began to look alive again. A fence mended here, a fresh coat of paint there, the place had stopped feeling temporary. Bull's stall was clean and bright, and his once sickly frame now rippled with quiet strength. The children who came to visit had grown comfortable around him. They brushed his coat, filled his bucket, and talked to him as if he understood every word. One afternoon, Jennifer Hayes, one of the mothers, arrived with her camera. She owned a small marketing company in town and had been filming little clips of the kids working with Bull. Tom, she said, you know people love these videos? I've been posting them online. Folks say you're showing what real care looks like. Tom wiped his hands on his jeans, surprised. It's just a bull and some kids learning how to be gentle. Jennifer smiled. Exactly. That's why it's working. A week later she returned, phone in hand, excitement in her eyes. Tom, look at this, she said, showing him the screen. Thousands of views. Comments from across the country. People talking about kindness, second chances, hard times. Some even asked how they could help. Help? Tom repeated. What could they do? Jennifer shrugged. Maybe donate. Maybe share. Maybe believe in something again. Word spread fast. Reporters called. Parents from other towns asked to bring their children. Someone donated hay, another sent money for tools. The little barn became a classroom and Bull the teacher. Tom watched as Jacob explained to a younger boy how to feed the bull properly. You have to talk to him, Jacob said. He listens. Tom felt pride rise in his throat. That evening, Sarah stopped by with a basket of food and stood watching the children laugh. You realize what you've built here? She asked. I didn't build it, Tom said quietly. He did. He nodded toward Bull, now standing calm and steady under the fading sun. I just followed his lead. When the last child left, Tom leaned against the fence and looked out at the field beyond. He couldn't see the future yet, but for the first time in a long time, he wasn't afraid of it. You and me, Bull, he whispered. Looks like the world's finally seeing what we're worth. The bull flicked his tail and snorted softly, like an answer carried on the wind. By the time autumn arrived, the place had a name, Bull's Hollow, painted in plain white letters above the barn door. Tom hadn't planned it. One of the kids had suggested it, and the others insisted on hanging a wooden sign they'd made in class. The name stuck. Parents brought pies, neighbors dropped off lumber, and the once isolated property turned into a small hub of life. Even the people who had laughed at him now drove out on weekends to see the miracle bull. One chilly morning, Dale stopped by again, standing with his hands in his pockets. You've stirred up quite a thing here, he said. You and that bull are teaching this town what it forgot. Tom chuckled. All we're doing is showing up every day. Dale nodded. That's more than most folks do. The community soon began helping in bigger ways. The feed store donated supplies, the local school asked if students could visit, and a few reporters came to film short clips. At first, Tom didn't want the attention, but then he realized it wasn't about him. It was about the story. The story of a man who'd lost everything and a bull that everyone thought was worthless, who together built something the town could be proud of. One afternoon, as the sun dipped low and painted the pasture gold, Laura's car pulled up the drive. She stepped out, wearing the same cautious look she'd had the day she left. So this is Bull's Hollow, she said quietly. Tom nodded. Didn't plan on naming it, but the kids did. She smiled faintly. It suits you. Stubborn, simple, and still standing. They both laughed, the sound awkward but familiar. She looked around, at the barn, the kids' drawings on the wall, and the healthy bull grazing nearby. You did this, Tom. You turned nothing into something. He shook his head. No. I just didn't quit. Laura's eyes softened. Maybe that's the difference. She hesitated before adding, the girls want to come out this weekend. See it for themselves. Tell them I'd like that, he said quietly. When she left, Tom leaned on the fence watching Bull. The animal turned his head, one ear flicking toward him as if listening. You were supposed to be useless, Tom murmured. Guess they were wrong about both of us. The wind carried the faint sound of laughter from the children down the hill, and for once, it didn't sound like pity. It sounded like home. The weekend came bright and still, the kind of Montana morning when the air carried a chill even under sunlight. Tom was stacking feed when he heard the sound of a car rolling over the gravel path. He wiped his hands on his jeans and turned just as the door opened. Laura stepped out first, then Emma and Sophie followed. Taller now, older somehow, but still his girls. For a moment, nobody spoke. Then Sophie ran forward and wrapped her arms around him. Dad, she whispered, you smell like hay. Tom laughed, a sound rusty with emotion. That's the best smell there is. They spent the morning walking through Bull's Hollow. The girls helped refill the water troughs, brushed Bull's coat, and asked endless questions about the kids who came to learn. Emma looked around the barn walls, covered in drawings made by children. Little hearts, animals, even a picture of a man standing beside a bull. That's supposed to be you, Tom said. Jacob drew it. Emma traced the line of the drawing with her finger. He's good, she said. Looks just like you. Proud but tired. Tom smiled. He's been through things too. At lunchtime they sat outside on the porch eating sandwiches Laura had brought. Dad, Sophie asked, is it true everyone made fun of you for keeping Bull? Tom nodded slowly. They did. They thought I'd lost my mind. And now they bring their kids to learn from him. She smiled, eyes bright. So you won. Tom shook his head. No, sweetheart. We all did. Sometimes the only way to win is to keep going until the world catches up. Later that day, when the girls went to walk Bull through the pasture, Laura lingered beside Tom. You found something here, she said softly. Something you couldn't find when we had everything. Tom stared out at the field, where Bull moved slowly between his daughters, gentle as an old dog. I stopped chasing what I'd lost, he said. Started caring for what was left. Laura looked at him for a long time. The girls and we'd like to come back more often. You're always welcome, he said quietly. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the land, Tom stood beside Laura watching their daughters laugh. He's changed everything, hasn't he? She said. Tom nodded. Yeah, he murmured, eyes on the bull. And he didn't have to say a word. By late winter, Bulls Hollow had become more than a small farm. It had turned into a movement. Families from neighboring towns drove miles just to spend a few hours there. Children who once feared animals now brushed Bull's coat with gentle hands, and teenagers volunteered to fix fences or clean stalls. The laughter that once seemed gone from Tom's world had returned, carried on every breeze. One frosty morning, Jennifer arrived with a folder in her hand. "You might want to sit down for this," she said, smiling. Tom frowned but obeyed. She spread out papers across the table. "The videos and posts we made? They've gone viral. Not just local, people across the country are following your story." Tom blinked. "Our story?" "Yes," she said. "Yours and Bull's. We've raised over $70,000 online. Enough to build new fencing, buy tools, maybe even add a classroom. This place is teaching kids what schools can't." Tom rubbed his forehead. "I don't know what to say." "Say yes," Jennifer laughed. "Let's build something bigger." He hesitated. "What if it all goes wrong again?" Sarah, who had stopped by to check on Bull, put a hand on his shoulder. "Then you fix it again. You've already done the hardest part, believing when nobody else did." Construction began in early spring. Volunteers came with trucks, hammers, and determination. Dale donated lumber, the school gave old desks, and a local contractor offered to pour a concrete floor for free. They worked side by side, community and strangers alike, building the new barn and an education space. Tom watched in quiet awe. The man who had once been the town's joke now led a project that brought people together. When the last nail was hammered, Tom stood in the doorway, the smell of fresh wood in the air, sunlight spilling across the floor. Bull stood nearby, watching as if he knew this was his doing. Tom turned to the small crowd gathered. "I used to think this ranch was everything," he said. "But maybe I lost it so I could find what really mattered." A soft wind carried the scent of hay and hope. Sarah smiled. "So what do you call this new place?" she asked. Tom looked at the sign above the barn door. "Bulls Hollow," he said simply. "Where everything that was once broken finds a reason to keep going." Spring turned into a full green summer. The small patch of land that had once been lifeless now carried the smell of cut hay and the hum of work. Kids ran through the fields laughing, Bull followed them calmly like a watchful guardian, and Tom's weathered face finally held light instead of lines. Every evening, after the last child went home, he would sit on the porch, a mug of coffee in his hands, watching the sun fall behind the hills. News of Bulls Hollow began spreading beyond the county. A journalist from a state magazine visited, then another from a national farm network. They filmed Tom teaching children how to brush Bull, how to check feed, how to talk softly to animals instead of shouting. When the segment aired, letters began to pour in, some from other farmers who'd lost everything, others from people who simply wanted to say thank you. Then one morning an envelope arrived from Montana State University. Inside was an offer, a partnership to create a youth agriculture program modeled after Bulls Hollow. Tom stared at the letter for a long time. It wasn't money that filled him, it was meaning. He called Sarah, who laughed when she heard. "Looks like your Bull just got promoted to professor," she said. The following months moved fast. The program grew, new barns rose, and more children came, some from miles away. Emma began helping on weekends, teaching younger kids to care for the animals. Sophie painted a mural of Bull on the side of the barn, his strong frame and gentle eyes towering above the entrance. Even Laura joined in, managing the growing work of scheduling and visitors. They weren't just a family again, they were a team. One afternoon during a community event, Dale stood up to speak. His voice trembled slightly as he said, "This man reminded us that value isn't in how much we earn, but in how much we care." He saved a bull, and in doing so he saved the spirit of this town. The crowd rose in applause, and Tom's eyes burned as he glanced toward Bull, who stood calmly near the fence, sunlight glowing off his coat. Later that night, when everyone was gone, Tom walked up to Bull and pressed his hand against the animal's broad neck. "You did all this," he said softly. "You made them believe again." Bull turned his head, brushing Tom's arm gently with his muzzle. The world around them was quiet, but in that silence, there was the sound of everything he had lost, and everything he had found. By early autumn, the fields turned gold again, and Bulls Hollow felt like a small, breathing miracle. The barn door stayed open most days, and children's laughter mixed with the sound of hooves and wind. The partnership with Montana State had made the place even busier. Students came from towns Tom had never heard of, learning how to care for animals, fix fences, plant properly, and understand that work could heal a person's heart. One morning, Sarah pulled into the yard with her truck and stepped out carrying papers. "You're not going to believe this," she said, waving a letter. They want to honor Bulls Hollow at the state fair next month, for contributions to agricultural education. Tom blinked at her, stunned. Us? We're just a bunch of kids and one tired farmer. That's the point, she said. You built something real. The fair came fast. Tom loaded Bull into the trailer, his heart pounding like he was taking a family member on a long journey. When they arrived, the fairgrounds buzzed with people, lights, and the smell of hay and roasted corn. The announcer's voice carried over the crowd as he introduced Bulls Hollow, a community that turned loss into learning. Tom led Bull into the ring. The crowd hushed, then applauded. Some faces he recognized, people who had once whispered that he was crazy. Now they stood clapping, eyes wet. The judge stepped forward, holding a ribbon. This animal and this man remind us what farming is truly about, he said. Not profit but purpose. Tom took the ribbon but his eyes were on Bull. We just kept going, he whispered, patting his neck. Bull snorted softly, almost like he understood. That evening back home the family sat by the fire. Emma leaned her head on his shoulder. You know, Dad, I used to think you'd lost everything. I did, Tom said. But sometimes losing everything gives you the space to find what matters. Laura smiled quietly from across the room. You didn't just save a bull, Tom. You saved us too. Outside, the wind rustled through the fields. Tom stepped onto the porch, looking out over the land glowing under the moonlight. Bull grazed nearby, steady and calm. We did it, boy, Tom murmured. You and me. And for the first time in years his heart felt whole. Winter came softly that year, blanketing Bulls Hollow in quiet white. The snow shimmered under the pale light, and the whole farm seemed to breathe slower, as if resting after a long journey. Bull was older now, broad, calm, his coat thick and shining. The children still visited, bundled in scarves, their laughter echoing through the crisp air. Inside the barn, the warmth from the stove and the steady rhythm of life kept the cold at bay. Tom often sat near Bull after the last class ended. He'd talk to him the same way he had when the calf was dying, softly, without hurry. You remember when it was just us in that old barn? He would say. Bull would turn his head, his single deep breath fogging the air. You didn't have much strength and neither did I. But somehow we both made it. Then one morning Sarah came with bad news. Tom, she said, her face pale, Bull's right eye looks infected again. Tom's stomach dropped. The old one? No, she said gently. The good one. She examined him carefully, then sighed. We'll try antibiotics, but if it spreads we might need surgery. And it won't be cheap. Tom pressed a hand to his forehead. Do whatever you have to. Sarah hesitated. Tom, even if the surgery works, his sight might not return. You've already done more for him than anyone could expect. Tom looked at Bull, who stood quiet, trusting. He never gave up on me, he said. I won't give up on him. That evening, Tom wrote a message on the farm's page. He didn't beg, didn't dramatize, just told the truth. Bull is sick again. He's the heart of this place and I'll do everything to save him. If you've ever believed in what we built here, please stand with us once more. He didn't expect much. But by morning, donations poured in, thousands of messages from old farmers, young students, parents, strangers. He taught my kids to be gentle. He reminded me to start again. We won't let him go. Sarah returned 2 days later, smiling for the first time in weeks. You've got more than enough, Tom. The whole town, and half the country wants him to make it. Tom's throat tightened. Then let's do it. The surgery took hours. Tom waited outside, hands shaking, unable to sit. When Sarah finally came out, she was smiling. He's going to be okay. Tom's knees gave out, and tears he'd held for years finally fell. He didn't say a word, he just whispered, thank you, and for the first time, believed it wasn't to anyone in particular but to life itself. Bull's recovery was slow but steady. The surgery left him one-eyed, stitched and fragile, yet somehow calmer, wiser. Every day, Tom walked to the barn before sunrise and sat beside him as he ate. The animal moved carefully, his steps uncertain at first, but his will unbroken. You still look handsome, Tom joked one morning, brushing Bull's neck. The bull's breath fogged the air as if he was sighing in agreement. Children came to visit during his recovery. They were quieter now, as if they understood the weight of it all. Jacob sat near Bull, reading softly from his schoolbook. He listens better than my class, he said once, making Tom laugh for the first time in weeks. The kids helped change bandages, refill water, and take notes about Bull's progress. It became a lesson none of them could find in textbooks, how to care for something broken and see it heal slowly, day by day. Sarah visited often, checking his wounds and smiling more each time. He's a fighter, she said. Just like his owner. Tom shook his head. He's tougher than I ever was. She smiled. You learned from each other. Weeks turned into months. By spring, Bull was walking strong again, his head high, his one good eye sharp and kind. The children cheered the first time he stepped out into the pasture. It was more than an animal returning to life. It was the proof that everything they'd built was real. Soon after, an invitation came from the state governor's office. They wanted to visit Bull's Hollow to announce new funding for agricultural education, a program inspired by Tom's story. When the day arrived, hundreds gathered at the farm. Families, students, reporters, and neighbors who had once called him foolish. The governor shook Tom's hand and said, "This started with one farmer who refused to give up on a so-called worthless animal. Today it's changing how we teach the next generation." Tom looked at Bull, calm among the noise, and said softly, "You hear that, old friend? You did it." The bull turned his head, one bright eye catching the sunlight, and for a heartbeat, Tom swore he saw something like a smile. The cheers around them swelled, but Tom only felt peace, the quiet kind that comes when a man knows his struggle has finally meant something. 5 years had passed since that cold day when Tom had found Bull dying in the dirt. Now Bull's Hollow stretched across 15 acres of green pastures and wooden fences, filled with the sound of laughter, hooves, and life. The barn had grown into a learning center. The fields had become classrooms. Tom often stood at the gate in the mornings, coffee in hand, watching the new calves graze while children brushed their coats. Every animal on that land had once been rejected somewhere else, just like Bull, just like Tom. Jacob was no longer the quiet 12-year-old who had first arrived in a winter coat 2 sizes too big. He was 17 now, tall and confident, guiding younger kids with a patience that reminded Tom of himself. "Mr. Callahan," Jacob said one afternoon, leading a group of students toward the barn, "you think Bull knows he started all this?" Tom smiled. "He knows. Maybe not with words, but he knows." Emma had gone on to study agricultural education at Montana State, and Sophie volunteered at shelters during weekends. Laura ran Bull's Hollow's office now, her laughter echoing through the halls as she handled calls, donations, and visitor tours. The family that had once fallen apart now stood stronger than ever, rebuilt on the same soil that had once buried Tom's hope. That spring, a film crew arrived to record a short documentary about Bull's Hollow. They filmed Tom teaching, Jacob training new helpers, and the children feeding the animals. When they asked Tom what the secret to his success was, he paused for a long time. Then he said, "I stopped trying to prove my worth. I just cared for what needed me. The rest took care of itself." Later that evening, when everyone had gone home, Tom walked out to the pasture where Bull grazed under the fading light. The bull was older now, slower but still strong. Tom leaned on the fence. "You know, partner, I used to think saving you was about mercy. Turns out it was about purpose." Bull lifted his head, that single wise eye gleaming softly. The horizon glowed orange and Tom felt Laura's hand slip into his. 5 years, she whispered. "Feels like a lifetime ago." Tom nodded, eyes never leaving Bull. 5 years ago I thought I had nothing," he said quietly. "But I had everything, I just didn't see it yet. I had a reason to start again." As the sun sank behind the hills, Bull gave a low, contented sound, deep, warm, and steady. It rolled across the pasture like a promise, echoing the truth Tom had learned the hard way. Sometimes saving something everyone else gave up on is how you save yourself. Moral lesson. Real value isn't measured in money, land, or success. It's found in compassion, in giving your strength to something that needs it. Sometimes the smallest act of care can rebuild an entire life, and sometimes the one you save ends up saving you.